There's something no one tells you about the narcissist you can't forget. And it's not what they did to you. It's what they're still carrying right now, even after you're gone. Because while you've been trying to heal, trying to understand, trying to move on, there's something happening inside them that they will never show. Something that explains everything. Why they hurt you, why they confused you, why nothing ever made sense. And once you see this, you won't be able to unsee it. Because the truth is, the narcissist was never okay. Not when they met you. Not when they said they loved you. Not even when they looked happy. And what they're hiding is the real reason your relationship felt like a puzzle you could never solve. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand something that changes everything. It was never about you. Let's start where most people get it wrong. When people hear narcissists, they think of someone arrogant, self-centered, obsessed with themselves. And yes, that's part of it. But that's not the core. That's just the surface. Because underneath that confidence, that control, that almost intimidating presence, there's something else. Something fragile, something unstable, something they are constantly trying to hide. And here's the first truth you need to understand. A narcissist doesn't have a stable identity. That sounds strange, because they seem so sure of who they are, so certain, so unshakable. But what you were seeing was not real confidence. It was construction, a role, a performance. Because at some point in their life, usually very early, they learned something dangerous. That being themselves was not safe. That vulnerability led to rejection. That authenticity led to pain. That love had to be earned, not given, so they adapted. They created a version of themselves that could survive. Stronger, better, untouchable. And over time, that version became everything, until they couldn't separate who they are from who they pretend to be. And what's left underneath that? Something they spend their entire life avoiding. A void. Now here's where it gets deeper, because that void, it doesn't stay quiet. It turns into something else. Something most people never see. Toxic shame. Not the kind of shame you feel when you make a mistake, but the kind that says there's something wrong with me at the core. Constant, unspoken, unbearable. And here's the irony. The person who made you feel small, insecure, not enough, was carrying that exact feeling the entire time. But instead of facing it, they transferred it onto you. Have you ever noticed how they knew exactly what to say to hurt you? Not randomly, not vaguely, precisely. Like they could see your weakest points. That wasn't an accident. That was survival. Because every time they made you feel inferior, they felt, just for a moment, less inferior themselves. And that's why it felt so personal. Because it was targeted, but not for the reason you think. It wasn't about you, it was about escaping themselves. And here's another layer that changes everything. The narcissist is not independent. They are dependent, deeply, but not on people, on validation, on attention, on admiration, on control. Psychology calls this narcissistic supply, and they need it like oxygen. Without it, everything starts collapsing, which is why they can't stay alone, why they always need someone close, watching, responding, feeding the image. And this explains something you probably lived, why they loved you, and then suddenly they didn't. At first, you were everything, perfect, different, special. They gave you attention, intensity, connection, and it felt real, too real. But here's the truth. That wasn't love. That was attachment creation. They weren't connecting. They were securing supply. And once they felt you were there, emotionally invested, attached, everything shifted. Subtly at first, then clearly. The criticism, the distance, the confusion, the feeling that nothing you did was ever enough and you tried to fix it. You tried to go back to how things were. Without realizing something crucial, that version never existed. And then comes the phase that leaves the deepest mark. The one most people don't fully understand. Because it doesn't just hurt, it rewires you. The manipulation, the emotional inconsistency, the silence, the gaslighting. Little by little, you stop trusting yourself, your thoughts, your memory, your instincts. You start asking questions like, am I overreacting? Did I misunderstand? Is this my fault? And that's not weakness, that's conditioning. Because when someone constantly distorts reality, your brain adapts. It tries to survive the confusion, even if it means turning against you. And that's how control really works. Not through force, but through disorientation. And here's something even more subtle. Something most people only realize much later. The confusion you felt, it wasn't accidental. It was maintained because clarity would have set you free much sooner. Think about it. Every time things almost made sense, something happened. A sudden shift, a new argument, a different version of the story. Just enough to pull you back into uncertainty. And uncertainty is powerful. Because when you're uncertain, you don't leave. You analyze, you replay conversations, you question your memory. You try to figure it out. And while you're doing that, you're still there, still engaged, still emotionally invested. That's why confusion is more effective than pain. Pain pushes people away. Confusion keeps them trying to understand, trying to fix, trying to stay. And the longer you stay in that state, the harder it becomes to trust yourself again. Because now, it's not just about them. It's about you no longer feeling sure of what's real. And that is where the deepest control happens. Now here's something important, and it might be hard to hear. The narcissist doesn't process emotions like you do. There's a real difficulty there, a disconnect. They feel things, but they don't understand them. They don't regulate them. So what happens? They act, they explode, they withdraw, they manipulate, they escape, not because they're unaware something is happening, but because they don't know how to handle it internally. So it comes out externally. Through you, that moment when they reacted out of nowhere, that wasn't about what you did. It was something already building inside them. And you just happened to be there. Again, not your fault. Now let's connect everything. Because there's a pattern here, one that repeats over and over. Idealization, devaluation, discard. Not once, not just with you, with everyone. And here's the part most people struggle to accept. This wasn't a special situation, it was a cycle. One they repeat without even fully realizing it. Because it's the only way they know how to relate. And now we get to the part that affects you the most. Even after everything ends. Because what you went through doesn't just disappear. It leaves marks. Real ones. Emotional, psychological, neurological. The anxiety, the overthinking, the hyper-awareness. The feeling that something is always about to go wrong. That's not random. That's your system trying to recalibrate after being in constant instability. And then comes the guilt, the most dangerous part. Maybe I could have done more. Maybe I should have stayed. Maybe it was my fault. No, that guilt was planted carefully over time Because if you feel responsible, you stay longer, you try harder, you tolerate more. But here's the truth that changes everything. You are not the problem, and you are never the solution. Because the narcissist doesn't change because you love them more. They don't change because you understand them better. They don't change because you stay. Change, real change, only happens when they face collapse. And even then, it's rare and it takes years. So what does that mean for you? It means this: you didn't fail. You weren't not enough. You weren't missing something. You were trying to fix something that was never yours to fix. And now, you're here, trying to understand, trying to make sense. And that changes everything, because awareness is where the cycle breaks. But here's something no one tells you. Healing doesn't feel good at first. It feels empty, quiet, unfamiliar, because for so long, you were used to intensity, to emotional highs and lows, to constant stimulation. And when that stops, there's silence. And that silence, it can feel uncomfortable. Because now, there's nothing distracting you anymore. Just you, your thoughts, your feelings, your reality. But that's where something powerful begins. Because in that silence, you start reconnecting with yourself, your intuition, your clarity, your truth. And slowly, something shifts. You stop asking, why were they like that? And you start asking, why did I stay? And that question, that's the one that sets you free. Because now, it's not about them anymore. It's about you, your boundaries, your worth, your standards. And that's when everything changes. Not outside, inside. So let me leave you with this. The narcissist will continue. Same patterns, different people, same cycle. Because they're still running from the same thing, themselves. But you're not running anymore. You're facing it, understanding it, breaking it. And that's something they may never do. So if this resonated with you, write this in the comments. I take my power back. Because that's what this is, not the end of something, but the beginning of you. And if you're ready to go deeper, to truly understand these patterns and never fall into them again, stay here, because this is just the beginning.